24 amazing guest speakers, and the goal of the summit is to provide practical tools, fresh ideas, and inspiration to creatives, change agents, community leaders, committed citizens who are looking to connect with seasoned professionals, whether to begin a new initiative or expand an existing one. Unlike any other summit you may have attended, we're going to show you how to stand up, speak out, and make a difference. I'm so excited. My guest today is Sheri Keys, and she's a mother of four, best-selling author, inspirational speaker, CEO of the Global Artist Academy and Network Building Academy. She's appeared on CBS, NBC, and Fox and has been featured in numerous magazines. Welcome, Sheri.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me, and it's a pleasure to be part of something so important, and honored to be with such a lineup also. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's been a dream for me to talk to so many wonderful people and to continue to share the stories. I was very lucky that when I interviewed over 100 people when I was doing my book, The Creative Activist, and the book actually highlights 36 stories. But there's so many more people out there doing incredible work. It's like this is my opportunity to even spread the word further and talk to more amazing people. So why don't we just get started and ask a little bit about who you are and who inspires you or what inspires you?
So I'm Sheri Keys, and a lot of people know me on the internet as Sheree McConnell. Been around since 2001 doing these online businesses, and so, I've been blessed with, at this point, 15, 16 years in, the pleasure of just meeting and building so many relationships as the internet gravitated, because, gosh, back then we were still plugging in cords in walls when my first company started. So, fast forward to 2007, and we're just have all these social networks all over the place. And so it's quite a different world than when I started it. But, I would say more than 50% of my database are still the same people that were with me in that first company, which was the National Association of Women Writers. And so what I've pretty much been doing, and that's why I love the creativity part of this, is I'll say what I've been doing professionally, and then where the activist comes in for me is, who I've evolved into over the last 16 years because of this thing called the internet, because it allowed me the freedom to stay home with kids and do things and make, a very good living, after a while, doing the things that I loved at the same time being able to, I always joke I would have never had that fourth kid if it weren't for having the successful companies, because, you just don't want to pay that much daycare to go to someone else's dream. So anyway, so the creativity, what I've been doing with these different companies is just going into different passionate rabbit holes. So I stayed in that book writing one, because I was just so passionate about the written word, and I always had been. When you look back at it, I've always loved creativity and writing and now painting. If you look back into our childhood, that's usually where what we're meant to do was there, but we get off track with the left brain society telling us to do other things. But so, once I had that third little girl, I gave myself permission to kind of take everything I had learned out in the professional world and try building my own business. And again, we now have the internet in 2001, so we could actually do that too. We could reach people in a way we never could reach them offline. And so that's how my journey started. And I was just really lucky enough that I started a business model that was really powerful, and it was quite by accident, but then it wasn't, because I had learned leverage in the corporate world, and I had learned the power of one-to-many versus one-to-one in business. And so I knew out the gate I didn't want to do anything that would leave me in a service-based one-to-one business. So I knew going into business that it needed to be very leverageable, very scalable, or it wasn't going to be worth my time away from my babies, because it would grow really slow. So I think that's a lot of things people aren't taught, especially women. So that's where my activist comes in. And I'll tell you, my first degree was a social worker. My second degree, and I got, these degrees, before I started in the corporate world, and then I got the master's while I was in the corporate world. the first one was social work, and then the second one was organizational management, which I always tell people it's like an MBA without the numbers, but more about the people. And so these degrees just really helped me think different. And so when I got into the entrepreneurial world, what I was teaching people was more about business models, and I was teaching women, especially because if you go into any college, all the women gravitate to the one-on-one. They're either nursing or social work or teachers. And then all the men gravitate over to those business schools or those engineering schools, and they're paid better because it's just what we're teaching our children in society from the very get-go. By the time they get to college, they all take it for granted and don't even question it. And so, that's part of what I felt like I was teaching women right out the gate was how to think differently, how to think scalable, how to think in a way that they started to own companies, but not just a service-based company, because that's really the same thing and often way harder than it is to work for someone else. And so and also just being really honest with people and telling them how hard it was, because that's a lot of what you don't get out in the world is you get a lot of people telling you all the good stuff and none of the bad stuff because they want you to sign up for everything.
Right.
So I always just had a really honest approach because I just felt like I had nothing to lose. I in the beginning I just wasn't there for the millions, and I say in the beginning because I definitely went through a phase where I got to, and that can be a whole nother discussion, but I got to a certain level of success and was playing with such big people, and I'm not going to say we all had such big egos in a bad way, because people with big, huge egos create amazing companies. But it was just a hard game to keep up with. There was never an end to it, and it did become all about the money. And the things I could tell you behind the scenes is, well, it was fascinating, it was fun, it was exciting, but my barometer for it just wasn't there. Meaning, my homeostasis really wanted a slower life. My homeostasis didn't want to have to handle business problems 24 hours a day. I really wanted to kind of have more of a lifestyle business and less of an empire. So I did the empire thing for about 5 years. We went over the million, got close to 2 million. But after about 5 years, I had my midlife catharsis, I call it, around 40. I was kind of done with that because I was seeing my kids and they're all getting older. So it was even easier to do that kind of business. But just wasn't what I wanted in life. Like, I didn't want to be.
So how did you determine what you wanted in life? I believe in visioning and writing out, how do I see myself in 5 years or 3 years, or what is it, who do I want to be, do, love, those kind of questions. What is the legacy I want to leave? So those are the kind of questions I always ask. And I was just curious how you came to decide this, and what was your process in revisioning your life?
Yep. So, part of what, people paid me $25,000 to $100,000 a year to do with them was take them through exactly that type of strategy work, because I would have the giant Post-it notes in my office, and they would come in for a day and fly in from wherever they were. And I would do that type of work with them because, the CEO is the one running everything. So if the CEO is not clear, their employees or their contractors aren't going to be clear, and you need to plan, years out and all that fun stuff. So, again, that felt easy for me to do, so I was always paying attention to that, and just always checking in with, part of the work I've done, because I've written like 9 books, is always checking in with intuition. And, because we have these 3 brains. We have a brain in our stomach, we have a brain in our heart, and we have a brain in our head. One's electromagnetic, that's in your heart. One is neural, that's in your gut. And then you have the brain in your head. And so the messages go to the gut first. So this whole thing of that, I felt it in my gut, is actually a physiological thing that we have been taught not to pay attention to. Because if you go back out into left brain society, and often in our schools, we're never taught that this is actually science of the body, to pay attention to those things, where it's scoffed at, it's laughed at, and in those circles. Now online, we love this stuff, right? Or in our
right. I'm totally about intuition and inspiration and imagination.
But if you go back into the corporate world and you go back into any of those worlds where the employees are, and certainly our children in the public school systems or even the private school systems, they're not taught any of this. And so pretty much only the entrepreneurs like Steve Jobs and people that we find our own tribes, we know that this is how we get into creativity. We know this is how you connect with the divine. We know the divine created our bodies like this so we could actually be a higher being and know what was coming before it hit us. Like literally know a car is coming down the street and could hit you, and you will get a sensation that it might hit you before you ever see it, because our bodies are built this way. But we're so out of tune with them because we're not meditating, we're high stress levels, and we're so screwed up about what is really important, in our society. And so yeah, that's where my activist comes in. I mean, I've been so vocal during this whole election that, it's been fun for me, but I don't know how fun it's been for everybody following me. But so yeah, and when someone says, "Oh, aren't you afraid of losing clients?" I'm like, no, not in the least, because this is my time to shine. I'm an activist right now. If I don't speak up, who will? And I
think that's a really important thing to talk about. How do we get people to move from apathy to action or fear? Because right now the conversations are all based on fear. And how do we get them to actually change the conversation and have these other thoughts and listen to their hearts, their mind, their guts, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that if you apply the 80-20 rule, which has really always worked with all my clients, you're not going to get 80% of people to do that. You're just not going to. So you're going to have to focus, put your message out there and know that only 20% are even going to come that way. And then there's only like 2% that are really going to be the people who have no fear. And that's why, every year when I have 10 huge clients, I've been teaching this for years, 2 people are going to completely freak out, project, throw a fit, try to get out of that contract, quit, just completely flip out. 2 people are going to be like, cool, see you on our next call. And they're going to be going off, literally making hundreds of thousands of dollars in between each call I have with them, coming back, getting more input, and going back out and doing it again. And then all those, 8 people or whatever that's left, 6 people in between, they're going to do normal, moderate steps. They're going to take some steps forward, some steps backwards. They're going to do normal growth. But I swear to you, every year I see this happen. And I also can't tell you which 2 are going to be the excellers and which 2 aren't, because I've seen people who have everything going for them not be able to walk through the fear. And I see people come in with nothing, just that's the year that they walk through all of the obstacles.
So what are some of your suggestions for people to walk through fear? What do you tell them?
I mean, you have to have someone honest who calls you on your stuff. We really need people to call us on our stuff. And so that's where having a really good coach who will do that for you. And I don't even care if the coach is good. So I have this whole other beef about people looking for perfection. There's no such thing. My last book was on how to live a perfectly flawed life, and doing that through creativity. So this whole creativity thing is so much fun to kind of play with. But so in the flaws, if you get a mentor, they're going to be so messed up. There's no one that's not messed up, especially people like, I just watched the Tony Robbins thing that's on Netflix the other night because everybody was going crazy about it. The man's had 3 divorces. Like, if you use that against him and undermine all the good he can do for you, then you're not getting it. Like, so the first conversation I have, because I get so many type A's, obviously entrepreneurs are type A's, many of them are, coming in, they don't like a rescheduled call, or they don't like, just to begin to see that their mentor is imperfect, and then all of a sudden they're quitting and they're using that as excuses. And so I have that conversation real quick, and I tell them, your success doesn't depend on me at all this year. I'm just here to tell you to do what you need to do to accomplish the goals that you told me you want to accomplish, and I'm here to tell you how, and then I'm here to hold you accountable, and then I'm here to share my experience in what I've seen before with other people. But what I'm doing in my own life right now has no bearing on your results. But everybody wants to make that their first excuse for not walking through the fire. 80% of people do that. And they're easy to see when they're coming in too, because they're the first people that tell me how bad their last coach was. And it doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter if she was. Like, I'm sure there's people out there who screwed up in a year and didn't give you the value that you needed. We're all in the same boat. Did I have people that gave me less value for something I paid for? Of course I did. And in those years, I was like, well, this sucks, but oh well. I got A, B, and C over here to get done, and this is all me doing it. So it really doesn't matter that D isn't what I wanted D to be, And so all the really successful people that I know and that I get to hang out with, we all kind of have that whole attitude, we just don't make excuses, and it isn't really fear anymore. But we definitely had to walk through that too. But it was really just for us.
How important is it for you to find a tribe of like-minded people and to collaborate and connect?
I mean, for me, it made a difference, but the tribe was different, obviously, at different times. But, I would have never hit those numbers that year when I was doing the empire building type stuff if I didn't have ladies around me like that. And, you probably have heard of them. I was in a group with Lisa Sasevich and JJ Virgin and Allie Brown.
I was a sassy myself, so I understand. I've been a sassy.
Yeah, well, we were in the $100,000 group, so we were like.
Okay, yeah, no, I wasn't in the 100,000, but I was. It was investment in myself, so I totally get it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important piece that people need to understand is even as activists, creative activists, that you have to invest in yourself and surround yourself with a container of support, because trying to do it alone, especially, let's talk about your writing process, tends to be alone, you tend to do it alone in your room, kind of thing. And so we spend so much time in our heads, and that I believe that we need that larger group, that container of support to help us. So let's talk a little bit about your writing process. You are a prolific writer, and let's talk about your new book that you're going to be coming out as well with, which is about creativity.
Cool. Yeah, until I see that you started that around there. Yeah, one more thing I wanted to say on that is really having the people around you that have a no excuses approach makes all the difference. So that's what I would say. None of those women, I would have never let them down that year. There wasn't an excuse I could have come in with that they would have honored. And so I just, when things would come up that were really hard, I would call out to the universe to get help with them, and I had never done that before. So that's what I wanted to say with that.
I love that. I think that's really important. That's a really important piece to talk about. So if you have any other thoughts on that, go ahead.
Well, I had to have it modeled for me, and these women modeled it. I've had a hard time in my own masterminds getting women to do that. So I do think there's something to the number, the skin in the game. Because I think that we had so much skin in the game, we could not make excuses. But I don't think you can do that very many times in life, and maybe just once. But
okay. Why don't you explain to people what a mastermind is? Because people on this call may not know what that is.
Yeah, and they're all kinds of different. So I've had them. I think I had them 6 years in a row. I'm trying to remember the amount of years that I had them going, meaning I offered them to clients, but. It's just people pay for access to many, many meetings within a year, and they also pay for private time with the coach. So the meetings will be with all the clients that coach or mentor has, whatever word you want to use. I'm all of those things because I consult sometimes, I coach sometimes I mentor. I'm a big mix of all the different words. A lot of people get really attached to wording, so I'm just throwing that out there. But and so it's just the level of the what the people in that group are working, what they'll do. And so I've just found it to be very proportional to what you pay, because obviously a person is going to have more access to people who can get things done, and she's going to be able to connect me to people I need to be connected with. And that's part of what all that money was about. It got me to people I could have never accessed at $25,000. And I didn't have the $100,000. I literally made the $100,000 plus 4 times more that year. So it was a total leap of faith, because I didn't have $100,000 extra lying around. I had 4 kids still to send through college at the time. This was like 2009. 2009. So anyway, so, it's not like I had it laying around or anything like that.
Can you explain, I think too, people there are different types of mastermind, but it's the idea that there is a collective mind, that there is power by sharing your thoughts and having other people brainstorm with you, if you want to talk about it that way, being available. So I think that's part of it. Not everybody's ever heard that before.
Yeah, it's connections and access to. And in business, access to other people's databases is the name of the game, because that's really what we need, is more database to get our message out there. And so, if you're in a good quality mastermind, you're going to have people there who've been in business for like 3 or 4 years and have some kind of database that you can go and then offer your brilliance and your expertise into that database. And so that's what happened with me. Nobody in my group knew the network business, and nobody in my group was published. And so I could provide all those services to them at a personal level and all that experience at a personal level, one-on-one, but then they also took me to all their groups, which is why everything I had over at my business grew 4 times that year, because I had 10 women here who were, successful at different levels, letting me into their databases and vice versa. So these masterminds it's what men have been doing for years. This is old school business, and how men have been running all the huge corporations you see. This is how they were built. It was these types of things are happening behind the scenes. It's really the only way to build business. So if women block themselves because they get so fearful, and we do, about numbers, in the old days, if I wanted to self-sabotage myself, who the first place I went to for permission was my husband, because he always said no. And he's ex-husband now, but at one point, I came back to my office after I just asked him if I could go on this trip, and the conference was going to be like $6,000, and he had a big cow. And I came back in my office and I laughed at myself, because I'm like, oh, if you really wanted to go on that, and I told myself I wouldn't have asked him. I would have just said, hey, I'm going to this. I wouldn't even have told him how much it was. But I self-sabotaged myself for whatever reason, and I explored that, and I laughed out loud like a crazy woman. I'm sure my kids thought I was crazy. Anyway, so it was just, I just find there's so much to just running these businesses. But, again, that's not what it's all about either, because I've gone full circle in all of this, like we said, and I've jumped off that train, and I've gone into more peaceful types of ways to do business, and I've taken that empire way back down to a lifestyle business, making a lot less money, because I just honestly don't want to work all the time anymore, because now I'm in my mid-40s, and I call it mini retirement.
I love it. So let's talk a little.
Yeah, you can do whatever you want. This is like your business. And I heard a quote by, there's a Netflix movie out called Women's List right now, and it's just these 7 different interviews with famous women, and it's just real quick. It's 20 minutes, so it's really good. It's called Women's List. One of the ladies on there said, women can have everything, but we have to do it in phases, because we just don't get to live the same lives as men in this society, and that's okay, because we get all the rewards of that too. She didn't add that part. That's me saying that.
Okay. So let's talk about being an author, a publisher, an artist, a painter, the creative part of your life.
Yes.
How do you define creativity?
So, to me, it's just anything that comes from the divine through your body. I didn't prepare this, so it's you opening up that vessel and letting the divine flow through you, and it can be through words or paint or photography, but it's when you're in the bliss, because you lose all track of time. Time does not exist, and you're in a place where all your body is tingly and it feels healthy. Okay, so maybe you don't feel tingly sometimes. Maybe you feel fearful, because I get a lot of beginning painters feeling more fear than tingling. But once you can work through that, which is what's so great about, the creative process and painting, or, getting past, the fear of writing bad or whatever it is that you're trying to create. Once all that's done with and you've practiced enough, then it's just pure bliss, because there are no mistakes anymore. There is only getting lost in it and then really letting the divine come in. And then that's where, pure brilliance pours out of people. And we're like, where did you get all that stuff in your head to, write the Avatar movie? that's amazing, or, it's just, that's where all of these amazing buying things come from is from a collective experience of all the past DNA that's ever been on this earth is flowing through you, so you didn't create it by yourself, but you had to get to a certain place. And yeah, it's a very long definition. I could go on and on.
Well, let's talk a little bit about what your process is for yourself. How do you tap into the divine intelligence? What do you do? I know you mentioned meditation, so let's talk about that.
So, it's really just getting started. So it's just doing it. It sounds very boring, right? But the more I paint, the more I get into the bliss. If I'm not picking up the paintbrush every day, or if I'm not at least, doodling in my journal or doing some type of creativity, I'll start to close the vessel and I'll have to reopen it later, versus if I'm doing it more often, I can just go and create something that's really good in 10 minutes. But, and we all go through phases, and I always tell people, don't be a perfectionist about it either. If you don't pick up a paintbrush for a month, that doesn't mean you're not a painter. We go through phases, we have responsibilities and yada, yada, yada. Same thing with writing. When I sit down and I write some crap for a while that, is just like so hard to get on the page, 20 minutes later, I get to a really beautiful sentence, and then the flow is kicked in. So
you schedule? I know for me, when I was writing my book, I had to put it on the calendar every day and do that. And the same thing. Yeah.
I've always treated all of what I do like a job. So it's typically when the kids are at school, and then I work a lot less in summer. So again, I've had all my businesses while I've had babies. So my oldest is 21 and my youngest is 10. So I've been doing this. I started the first company when they were all 3 girls under 5 running around. So yeah, my schedule is usually dictated by what's going on in my life with my kids. But there's a lot as they grew up. Because 2 are gone and off to college now. What happened is it became more and more like a business. It was just they went off to school and I started my first meeting. So I do batch. I have days that I have to knock out businessy stuff, and then I have days that are open for all the projects, because those are 2 different energies. And so that's what I do. So, interview days and meeting days don't get mixed up with project days.
Okay. Well, that's a really interesting way. So let's talk a little bit more about what that means to you. And how you do that.
So I use, and this is, honestly, this is the first thing that all my clients, we go over their scheduling system, and I use Google Calendar, because there's so many things I could go on and on about what I like about Google Calendar and its flexibility and blah, blah, blah. I have a call that's how to run your business with Google. But so the first 2 things I do with most clients is have them print out all their financial reports so we can look at what the business is really doing and what it's not doing. And then I have them sit down with me and show me how they manage their time. And 80% of clients, it's a complete mess with both. So that's like, if you get those 2 things in order and you actually have some kind of system for paying attention to your financials and measuring your financials, and then you have a time management system and you're not unrealistic with it, which is where a lot of type A entrepreneurs think they're super people and they have more hours in the day than other people, and they don't. So every year, 4 of my clients will be super unhealthy and not taking care of themselves because they have superwoman syndrome, and again, that goes back to time management and past corporate world unhealthiness that taught them that they should work around the clock and that's okay. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that gets there, but it's simply just having really good boundaries and knowing where ROI comes from in a business. So like right now, anytime I do a telesummit, those are lots of work, right? Because there's so many appointments you have to do, so many calls to get done. So I try to only do intense growth things in the business, like what you're doing with the telesummit, like 4 times a year. And my rule for going to conferences is a minimum of 4 times. I can go to more, but I don't want to be behind the desk too much. I don't want to be not out there seeing hundreds of people. So, I have all these like rules in business that keep business growing. But then the projects, those get planned in the company based on the return on investment, and a lot of that comes from experience of having done them before, so I know the numbers going in. And then, there's just a lot of things I don't do that I did in those early years because they don't pay well, and then, I schedule client days in, all that kind of stuff,
Okay.
So,
I'd love to ask you, what is the Global Artist Academy?
So that is a place where artists come to be supported in their art, all kinds of different art. Last year we were posting like journal art videos, and it's a mix of, because I had such an entrepreneurial market before I started that, a lot of entrepreneurs were coming there, so I was explaining to them why they would, and bless their hearts, because I used to be this person too, why in the world would they want to do something like write in a journal? Because that's so not empire building-y type thing to do. So I was just teaching them how it makes them healthy, how it opens their brain up, how doing something for 30 minutes like this will actually help you get million-dollar ideas. So I kind of was talking to the entrepreneurial market. But then now there's a lot of artists there, and so it's just really, diving into all the things that help you create. A lot of it is painting. I'm always trying to pull in, sculptors and photographers and all that too. But, you usually attract what you are, and so I'm definitely like a big painter now, and so a lot of that's just coming in because that's what I'm putting out too. But the long-term goal with it is that we're going to get other people in there, because that's how communities work. As we get more and more successful photographers, I won't have to do the attracting for the photographers. Those members will be. But it just starts growing in a different way once it builds community.
That's wonderful. Well, we're running out of time. I would love for people, how can they get a hold of you? How can they find out more about the Global Artist Academy and connecting with you?
Sure. You could just go to globalartistacademy.com, and there's a free membership there, and it's got all kinds of cool stuff in it, very visual stuff. And, it's really for anybody who feels like, I don't know, anytime that you see something really creative and colorful and a part of you says, I wish I had time for that, then that's you. And so it's just trying to figure out when and where in your life that you could possibly take the time to nurture that part of what your soul's telling you. And so people know that. They just know it, or they don't.
Okay. So do you have any final words for people about creativity and how important it is in their own lives, what they can do about that?
A long, long, long time ago, back when I was writing, and I was deep in that rabbit hole. I write still, but I was so in the rabbit hole. That's all I talked about, because I was the owner of the National Association of Women Artists for 10 years, so it was just a deep, deep dive. And I said, I knew, and I still know, is we're literally put here on this earth to create. That's what our bodies were made to do. And I remember my ex-husband at the time going, oh, that's not me, though. Like, how would that even apply to me? And I go, when you go out in that garage and you're doing things with all those tools, I have no idea what you do out there, but I know you've got a bunch of them, and you're out in that garage and you lose track of time, and I see you so happy out there, and you get lost out there for 4 or 5 hours at a time doing things with your cars and your jet ski and all that stuff. I go, you are creating. You are in your bliss, and you are creating a world that makes you happy. And I know you actually created things, like you fix things and do things. You know what I'm saying? But I have no idea what they were because it wasn't my bliss. But that's creativity. And so our bodies really do crave it. They really do. We tend to ignore it because we have all these responsibilities, and we build our lives in such a way. I'm a big, big proponent of getting everybody to watch I Am, which is a Netflix and an iTunes movie, but it's all about, letting go of stuff and not getting these big houses and really trying to figure out what's important in your soul. And it's by the producer of all these movies you've heard of. And he went through this midlife catharsis, because he was a multi-billionaire, and he gave it all away. And what he went through, it's very fascinating. And, there's not a person that I haven't had watch that didn't change their life. So it's kind of a big deal. And it changed mine. And I got off that train. That was part of the reason I got rid of the empire business model, is because I just didn't want to keep going that way. The problem with that is there's no end to it. You never get enough millions. And that's okay for some people because, again, look at Apple. Thank God Apple's here because it's giving us all this cool stuff, right?
Right.
So Steve Jobs wasn't who Steve Jobs was, we wouldn't have all these amazing technology and innovation that came from creation. So
Right.
I'm just saying, you just have to do your own self-exploration to know what you were put here to do.
Well, and he said one of the best and most creative periods of his life when he was out of Apple, when they fired him, and he went and just created Pixar. So creativity comes in many forms, and it isn't always about the empire building, but it ended up building empires for him. So, yeah. Well, thank you so much for being our guest today, and I loved our conversation, and I look forward to working with you in the future because she's working on a new book and a documentary, and so I'm delighted and thrilled. And to all our listeners today, this was a very rich conversation, and I hope you take the time to think about where are you in your life, and are you empire building? Are you ready to take a step back and have that work-life balance? What is it that you're really looking for? So pay attention, figure out how to use your creativity in your life, and be an activist